and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scam and jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, brought a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my raw top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose with big holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio on UCY.tv. This is your host, as always, Chris Shea, here for another Sunday night edition of this great radio program. And tonight we are talking about how pretty much what can be summed up is that I'm going to dispel the notion that Congress, the Senate, anybody in the government, president, I say all these people saying that Trump or that Congress is going to veto the martial law or whatever, the Senate's going to save us from gun control. But I'm going to just dispel the notion that there's any kind of infighting within the government. And at this point, they all belong to one side. Every single person in the Senate and the House of Representatives, even Bernie Sanders, even Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, whatever, every single one of them. You know, it seemed like just a few years ago, these people that have been shown to be 100% establishment shills in this 2016 election were shown to be as these potential saviors of the United States, or these people, beacons of liberty that will rise this country up from the tyranny of the last few years. And by the last few years, this goes back 102 years plus. And at this point, people don't realize how far we've went, that what it would take to reverse all that's happened would just be absolutely drastic. But people were regarding Rand Paul and Ted Cruz as potentially an option that could save America and stuff like that. And and now you look at it, and a lot of those people shut up. Rand Paul refused to denounce Israel during any time in his campaign and before, unlike his father, who had a much different stance when it came to Israel, and definitely did not consider them an ally. And Ron Paul was, I think, quite a bit talked about pretty negatively in Israeli press and stuff like that. But Rand Paul, not so much. And Ted Cruz was shown to be an extreme Zionist. And there was this talks of possibly a Paul Cruz ticket in there, which would just be two supposed libertarians and ultimately the foreign policy of what it is today. Every single one of these people in Congress, and I would go as far to say that probably we'll never see another person single. The status quo of our government is at this point that every single member, from Congress any national seat has to swear an allegiance to Israel, an allegiance to the bankers, an allegiance to the mega corporations. There is no representing, there's not that, this good old boy from whatever district is going to represent his people because that's how they do it in that district. It doesn't matter where they're from. It doesn't matter if they're from New York City or if they're from some remote county in Alabama. They are going to be on the side of the establishment. And that's what people really need to get through their heads. And there's going to be no Trump to come in and save the United States. Like, I still see people falling for that illusion. And to believe that Trump even said anything to the contrary, it's like, please point me to where he said stuff about finally cutting our $5 billion. $5 billion in tax dollars that go to Israel every year. There's $8 million per day. They only have 6 million people total. So it's like every single Israeli person receiving a dollar every day coming from the United States. Every single last person, man, woman, and child inside of Israel receiving a dollar from the United States every day. These also, where the money ultimately ends up in is programs such as, and also they give all kinds of bonuses and stuff like that. Okay, we're going to give you your scheduled $5 million or $5 billion per year. Plus, if you plus we decided to give $80 billion over the next 10 years additional. So ultimately, for the next 10 years, they're going to be receiving a they're going to, at the end of it, they'll have received their $5 billion normal, and then they get $50 billion at the end of the year plus the $80 million package. So they have $130 billion over 10 years time. These are absolutely absurd numbers. $130 billion, I think could possibly be a slightly low estimate of how much money. Also counting the military aid that's going over there with all the fighter jets. They use American fighter jets to bomb the Palestinian people. And every one of those people in Congress are not doing shit about it. In your Senate and the president. People go on and on and on about in the little InfoWars circle about how they believe Barack Obama to be Muslim and that Islam is the root of all the bad in this government and just all the root of all the bad around the world. And then apparently the Rothschilds and Soros, apparently they're all Muslims. That's what the InfoWars people seem to want to imply. I don't know. And then they go as far to say that, that Muslims are in this conspiracy to take over the world and that there's no really such thing as a moderate Muslim, or they're few and far between, but like the grand majority of them are moderate. Who's not moderate? I'll tell you who's fucking not moderate. Israel and all their crowd, the Zionists inside of Israel. There's a ton of fucking fanatics. I mean, there's enough where they can have, where they have all these people that go into their military, and that everybody is forced to go into their military. Well, there's only a few that refuse, so they can't be too conscientiously against it because they won't refuse and take the jail time. They rather go in the military and participate in either the harassment of the Palestinian civilians or the bombing of the Palestinian civilians. I want to talk about another thing. All these people in the alternative media, they use Breitbart. Breitbart they think this is a valid alternative media source. Breitbart is ran by a Zionist group that, if you notice, they blame everything on Muslims, just like InfoWars is turning into. They all make Israel seem like they're the victim in all the Middle Eastern affairs, and they ultimately they start going into this the fear porn. Terrorists are inside your country. Anybody that is against anybody that they try to make it seem like that anybody that's not for hating Muslims is naive and a stupid liberal, and they fall right into, and then they support Trump, a Zionist, and just another part of this show. It's all circus act. The Trump versus Clinton election. You're going to tell me this is a real election? This is what a real election looks like? This is a joke. This is a parody of an election. And a lot of the world is laughing at the United States that a lot of Americans actually see this as a real election. We have Trump. It's like the same script, really, as 2012. They just recycled it and kind of made it a little bit more emphasized. The losing side, which is going to be Trump, is that the American people lose support or fall out of support of the rich billionaire. In the last case, it was a rich multimillionaire because they find him to be obnoxious and out of touch with regular people. And they see him as a hypocrite, a flip-flopper, and also they believe that he is going to be too harsh or something like that. They believe he's going to lead to some kind of dictatorship. Kind of like Romney Trump is Romney 2.0 in the script of elections. Who's the loser? And the winner is the one they see as the moderate, more sane candidate, but ultimately has the same agenda as the candidate that they saw to be insane or / obnoxious. And they believe Trump to be insane, while Clinton has acted pretty weird herself. But ultimately, this thing has been rigged for Hillary Clinton. And you're just going to be completely naive, like Breitbart and InfoWars, to believe that Trump actually could win it and to believe that he would actually be a better option. It would be the same way either way. Trump, I say it all the time, is Breitbart and InfoWars. It's the same stuff, kind of narratives. It also is that they say, oh yeah, if Trump's not president, Muslim refugees from Syria will come rape your wife and ban pork in your country. And also, it's like I love how Americans they find that scary, the pork being banned. I mean, it's not the greatest meat even to eat in the first place. That's what's scary. You know what's scary? I'll tell you what's scary. Is that people in Israel are watching bombs fall on I've watched bombs fall on Palestinian children in the past. Like it's a movie theater. Like they were just in a drive-in movie. I mean, I really hope it's not as bad as I think it is, where it almost looks like the scene looks like something out of they went to watch some movie and it looks like something that you like invite your girlfriend out to. It's like, hey, I don't know. I was gonna give what's it? I don't know. It's a stereotypical Israeli woman name. It's like, but they invite your. They invite your. It's like, hey, you want to come to see the bombing of Palestinian children with me? Yeah, sounds like a fun night. That's what I hope it's not like, but it almost looks like it's to that point. And I see the sickness at the core and the ugliness at the core of these political Zionists and the Zionist lobby, and their words from these Zionist rabbis. I can't put it past them. At the very minimum, still. They are obviously being amused to an extent of Palestinian people being bombed. These are other people. Now, they don't see it, though. They see them as animals. And the propaganda inside their country tells them that Palestinians are animals. They also don't think too highly of us Americans. And Americans need to get that through their head, is that, yeah, you might see Israelis in a warm, nice way, but the Israelis, a lot of them don't see you the same way back. Now, not every Israeli is like that. There's some Israelis that have refused to go into the draft and stuff like that. But I'm saying that people talk about all the time about how Muslims are there's not many moderate Muslims. Most Muslims are extremists and stuff like that. If you want to look to a place that has an alarming amount of their population being extremist fanatics, it's the Israel and the Zionist population. And there's some fanatics over here. They have people over here. There's definitely training camps, I guess, or I guess you could say, yeah, it's these Christian Zionist churches that have preachers spewing out false doctrine, it's definitely a twisting of the Bible in order to support this twisted state over there. When you have these twisted preachers preaching out the stuff and pretty much brainwashing lots of Americans, this is like what they tell that there's Islamist imams all in the United States that are turning Muslims that are preaching extremist ideology. But there is in this country people like John Hagee who are saying that if you don't support Israel, you're going to hell. So apparently, if you don't support the bombing, the starving, the denying of basic human necessities to these Palestinian people, apparently that equals hell. They are living in hell practically. This is about 2 steps above any description of hell that you can imagine. I mean, the only thing this is not even an open air prison, because in a prison you have food and water. They are not guaranteed food and water, and you're not going to get bombed in a prison unless you're in a prison, I guess, in a war zone. But this place is like a giant war zone, but they can't leave. And people just think that they have somewhere to run. Where are they going to run? Are they going to fucking dive in the ocean? That's the only place they got to go, because Egypt doesn't even allow them to cross there. A lot of times their border's closed at the Rafah crossing. So where are they going to fucking run? They could go. Pretty much their options are in Gaza. Gaza is a word that most Americans don't even seem to know. And it seems like when you say Gaza, it's almost like you said something anti-Jewish. Like you said, I support Hitler. I don't know. That's what people take it in this country. Gaza is a big-time example of what these people that are in charge of our government, that are working with the Saudis and the Israeli government, are able to do. And they're able to do it on a much larger scale than what's happened in Gaza, where a few million people are affected. They could have where a few billion people are affected. And ultimately, people need to realize that in our government, there is no way that we can do this within the system and take these bastards out. The only way would be a total dismantling of the government. But with this government, there's no working within the system anymore. I mean, sure, we can do little protest votes and we can do little things to stage our discontent, but it's not. We can't realistically think this is going to go anywhere. You know, people think that voting for whatever these third-party candidates is going to go anywhere. They're rigged against them. There's no way that they would let these third-party candidates win. And anyways, Gary Johnson, would that even be that great for him to win? He's a former Republican. Close buddies with Mitt Romney, or his vice president, is close buddies with Mitt Romney. And they're, and for many years, this guy was for gun control. So everybody has jumped aboard the Gary Johnson bandwagon. I was on it 4 years ago. I was a lot more, I wasn't quite as informed back then about politics, but I'll more blame my reason why I was Gary Johnson supporter in 2012 is because back then he seemed to say different. It wasn't quite the same message. Now he's definitely kind of just went into the mainstream politics. You don't hear him talk about his concern when it's still a very high possibility that Israel will attack Iran. Now, in fact, I think that next year it's more likely than ever. Israel will attack Iran, and the United States will back them up. But Israel won't attack Iran until they know that the United States will back them up, because Israel would lose in a combat with Iran, because most of the time they're fighting people that don't even have guns. It's not really they don't really fight wars; they just do genocides. So when they have to actually combat against one of the best militaries in the world, they would lose. So that's why they're going to bring in the Americans, who can beat the Iranians. And the Iranians are no joke of military either. They're not like Saddam's military that was, all kind of discontent and barely had shoes for their soldiers. Even though it was the fourth largest military in the world, the morale of their military was so low. Plus, ultimately, Saddam was an American ally at the beginning. So I think that has to factor in to some extent that maybe Saddam gave up because he believed that he wouldn't have the fate that he would, or that he was going to get some kind of mercy. The Iranians, however, never have played ball ever since 1979 was the West. So if the Iranians were to get in a war with the United States, or they're not going to give up till the very end, I mean, they're going to fight. And it'd be a very ugly. This is talked about like a war. This is World War III, pretty much. We're talking about if this was to happen. And all the people right now that are joining the military should know this. They should know that what they're getting themselves into. That there won't be many places safe in the military of not getting sent over to Syria and Iran. Now, you think that's going to be all cool. A lot of people think it's going to be like a video game. But just remember, going down some dusty road at 120 degrees, and got tons of shit on your back, and just talk about the physical strain part. And any second you might get, any second that you might get hit by a missile or some shit. There's always that constant fear, and the stuff that you will be forced to do in the United States military. Stuff that you'll never be able to forget that you did. Stuff that will never, ever be excusable. That's the kind of stuff that being in the United States military entails. So anybody that's listening to this show and thinking about that, just keep that in mind. And also, the United States military does not protect America's interest. They don't protect the American people's interest because they're controlled by the United States government. And who's the United States government? Like I said, when this whole long thing is that the United States government ultimately is the military. The United States government is controlled by the New World Order. The United States military is the military that the New World Order uses to impose its will on these Middle Eastern countries, on these third world countries. And, but if the U.S. military actually protected the freedoms and protected the Constitution of the United States, all those fucking people in the Congress, the Senate, and up there at the presidential level would be arrested. And we would have arrest warrants issued out for all these top mega corporation CEOs, the Rothschilds, every single one in their family would have an arrest warrant for them, like Russia released the arrest warrants for the Rothschilds. But no, we don't have any of that. What we have is ultimately a government that is our government are just proxies for I guess that's a word you can use, but these people, like I said, the president is a corporate spokesman of America. That's what it should be called. These people don't have much power at all. And people, as we get closer to this election in November, we must not fall for the illusion. We must continue to keep our eye on the prize, which our eye on the prize is not, is not this irrational idea that Jill Stein or something like that can get elected, which a lot of people seem to think is also is one I hear a lot more about. But it's the total dismantling of the government. I mean, the total removal of every single one of these people in these high public elected official offices. A total removal of everybody from Congress, from the House, from the Senate. There's not a single one. There's not a single one. People, I'm getting just disgusted by these people that are saying, "Oh, Hillary Clinton won't be that bad. Oh, Hillary Clinton said she will support this whatever renewable energy thing." Yeah, and that's why she has tons of big giant oil donors that give money to her, because she's actually dedicated to renewable energy. Just follow the fucking money where the money's coming from, and you'll realize that they're all jokes of candidates, and they were from the very beginning, all the major candidates. And I think people would feel a little bit would feel a little silly when it becomes, because it's so clear, it's so public, a lot of this information, and people continue to fall for the illusion, and also continue. I see people in the even in the alternative media making Muslims to be like the enemies of the United States. And if you want to point to somebody in the Middle East that's an enemy of American people, like I said, there's this country that participates in mass racism against the Arab and black populations of their country. They are fanatics of a religion, or religious fanatics. They believe that their race is superior, and that the rest of us are animals or that they believe themselves to be practically divine gods on this planet, and their prime minister said so. Their prime minister said so. People, you bring up these you bring up the facts and they start freaking out. It's like, anti-Semitism. Oh, you must be a Nazi or whatnot. How could I fucking be a Nazi? I'm not even fully white. Like, I would support it. And also Nazism has more connections to Zionism than you think. Just look at the transfer agreement. Just look at who was Hitler funded by. Same people that consider pretty much Israel to be their HQ, almost. Israel is practically, I mean, they got their Israeli Supreme Court is on Rothschild Boulevard. What more indications do you need? And then there'll be these supposed truths would be like, but no, the Bible says that we must defend Israel at all times. Okay, go flip over to Revelations, 2:9, that says about the synagogue of Satan, and then come talk to me. I know again, and then a lot of these same people don't know who the hell King James is. I have to put in perspective. How controlled the Rothschilds are, how controlled Israel is by the Rothschilds. It's just the fact of who built the parliament. Where does the Israeli Supreme Court lie on? And who was the land of Israel promised to? Was it promised to the Jews? Or was it promised to the Rothschilds? Just read the Balfour Declaration in 1917, which set forward before World War I was even won. Which at that point, they already had decided that after the Ottoman Empire would fall, that the British would take it over to eventually hand it over to the Zionists. At that time, the Ottoman Empire still controlled Palestine, and there was a lot of fighting in the Middle East actually during World War I. That's what I think a lot of it was about, was taking out the Ottoman Empire, who controlled the land of Palestine and wouldn't sell to the Zionists, or at least didn't win in 1905. So there definitely was a motive to take them out. It's people. I wonder what is the general opinion, because people that probably rode on the train, that is my radio show since the very beginning, all the way back to November 2013, and they probably see that my I'm definitely have a little bit more fervor, I guess, when it comes to talking about political Zionism, and that the level. I mean, it's kind of funny that it got me almost in probably some serious trouble when I was in high school, because I had pissed off somebody that I'm pretty sure had some kind of connections, just because of the fact of how dedicated he was to supporting Israel. He was a Jewish Zionist who kind of tried to act like he was my friend, but you don't take that as an indication of anything, that they act like they're your friend, because that's what happens sometimes when you run into these Israeli trolls online. They act like you're a friend, and then they set you up for some shit. Like, they sometimes offer you a free trip to Israel. Now, at the very minimum, they're going to give you a propaganda tour of Israel. But what scares me the most is what the unknown. What could be the worst case scenario? I mean, they bring you on the flight, and they on the Israeli air or something like that. Your meal gets poisoned or some shit, or when you're there, you get thrown away. Or thrown away in their prison for whatever bullshit they can find. I mean, because for one, it's like I know in America, talk about Israel can pretty much borders on a hate crime. How they consider it, in the way I talk about it, which I don't even have any kind of inclusionary statements of all Jews into how I talk about Israel, because I don't believe all Jews are responsible for the state of Israel. But they still will drop that hate crime charge on you sometimes, talk about Israel in the way I talk about Israel the way I do on this network. So I can imagine Israel, that this kind of rhetoric would probably be some kind of major fucking offense. And, I can imagine, all they just said is that's also, I just remembered something. What about somebody said it, I don't know if they're getting on to what the thing I was saying, is that the Israeli organ trade, that they're the biggest violator of all those rules against organ trafficking. All seem to be Israelis a lot of the times. What's funny is that today I was watching a show about organ trafficking on Nat Geo, and they were trying to, I think they were going to go down the route that the Israeli government is trying to do something about it, when they have this massive problem that no one else really has with this organ trafficking. I mean, it's worse per capita, I think, is the numbers, than China, India, or the people in the United States, stuff like that. More people in the United States that get convicted or caught organ trafficking are Israelis. So I can imagine that could be a possibility, that you get there and you're at your hotel or something like that, they drug you, and then they take a fucking kidney or something like that. If not something more important. You wake up and you got the stereotypical wake up in the ice bath tub, and you got a big scar on your by your kidney. That's something like that could happen. I could see that being in the realm of possibilities. But I wonder if people that have listened to my show for a long time, I know that I'm probably not doing exactly a good thing to try to draw in more of the young viewers that like people are trying to reach out the young generation, because they probably just tune in, and out of context they just hear me ranting about Israel, and they probably just think I went down some Nazi way or something like that, and I've turned into a full Nazi. And then unless they hear about my stance on Nazism and fascism, and they realize that no, I'm not. It's sad how it is in America, where that if you're not 100% on board of Israel, people start throwing the Nazi accusation at you. And I could just imagine that the Palestinian prisoners that are inside of Israel, I know how they get treated. They get treated absolutely terribly. It's like Guantanamo conditions in a lot of their prisons. They already have the same that's worse than a prison that they make them live in, the occupied territories. But when you actually get sent to prison as a Palestinian, and they don't just send adults to prison in Palestine, they send like kids, like 12-year-old kids, to the real big boy prison, to the big house. But there, it's you get tortured, you get all kinds of, probably starved. I can just imagine the conditions must be absolutely terrible instead of an Israeli prison where Palestinians are housed. And Americans that believe that it won't have. It's like, they won't do the same stuff that they do the Palestinians to Americans. Just look at Rachel Corrie. She was blocking a house from being bulldozed, and they bulldozed her over. This dude. I mean, this guy must have been a sociopath himself, or a psychopath. Because what kind of person, it's like, it's one thing to taunt and act like you're going to run somebody over with your bulldozer, but when you actually you flatten them with your bulldozer because they were trying to defend probably most likely an innocent Palestinian family from getting their house getting torn down. And this is, you mow down a 20-year-old woman. she was practically, it was all, she was barely, it was almost like she was practically still a girl. I mean, she's 20 years old. She was a woman, and a very brave one, a courageous one. And they fucking flattened her. If anyone that doesn't know who Rachel Corrie is, look that shit up. And I'm sorry. I think that I've probably already reached some kind of. I would like to see how many, if hopefully my amount of curse words per show is not higher than the amount of minutes. Like, I don't have more than one curse word per minute average, but it's probably a little bit higher, possibly. I don't know, some shows. I don't think. I mean, that's 120. The thing is that sometimes we need a little bit more. A little bit more to emphasization of what I'm saying. So we got we got our interjections, our regular interjections that we use in the English language. But if we were just to consider curse words, use them as interjections to what we're talking about, to just really put out the point, to put in big bold, an equivalent of in written text of putting in bold letters, but I'm putting in bold letters out to you on the radio waves. That would be the equivalent. It's like all this stuff doesn't offend Americans. All this war over there, what Israel does to the Palestinian people with their tax dollars, what their tax dollars go to with our military, and what they do in Syria, the funding Islamic extremists that they scream about, but yet support the U.S. government that sends money to the Islamic extremists. All this stuff doesn't offend them, but a few curse words offend them. And it's really weird. It's just the Americans' weird sense of morality, and the American people, of what they prioritize today. I would like for everyone, just take a second. Just think, next time you have a beer, you have a dinner with whatever family members, because, you might be, friends are going more to strangers. Strangers can be very hard to convince. You're not going to be, it's going to be hard to convince your coworkers or whatnot of this. And for a lot of people, it's not exactly wise to try to be talking about politics at work. But somebody should be able to convince, and at least will be willing to listen to what you have to say, is your family. Especially if it's your own parents or your kids or your brothers or sisters, maybe your cousins. Next time you're at the family dinner, just mention the stuff. Just say that, look what happened over there the other day. Look, isn't that a tragedy that the 3-year-old was shot in Palestine by Israeli soldiers? And start mentioning, that our government gives $5 billion of taxpayer money every year to Israel. And then people that just open their minds to it, just ask a few questions. Does this really sit right with you? That Hillary Clinton, back in 2007, pretty much pledged to AIPAC. Which, did you know that AIPAC, a lobby that lobbies in the interest of a foreign country, is the biggest lobby in America? Did you know that she pretty much pledged to AIPAC to bomb Iran if she became president? There's these videos of her laughing about bombing Iran. So, Hillary Clinton, back in 2008 when she was running for president for the first time. And then ultimately Barack Obama, I guess they decided, would be the puppet that would push their agenda for the next few years, and then Hillary would come in afterwards. Just pose some questions at your family next time you sit down with them. When watching TV or whatever, and especially if you're watching the news, that issue comes up, and start talking to them. And then you got some sources. Definitely have the sources ready, and you definitely got to put make a solid argument about how. Also, you should talk about the U.S.'s liberty, because if there's one thing that really gets to the heartstrings of a lot of Americans, and they should, because these people, what most soldiers do, do believe that they're protecting freedom in our Constitution, even though they're not, but that these Navy sailors were killed by Israel in 1967. the USS Liberty, the people that I interviewed on this network. Remember that? People. It's like the people say, "Where do you hear that?" I bet it's not true. I literally interviewed the fucking people involved. A lot. These people were injured too. These people were directly impacted physically by Israel, by their bombs coming out, or by their, or actually, it was their machine gun fire coming from their helicopters, and then when they were in the water, they're still strafing them with the machine gun fire. If somebody, and there's some people that will defend the USS Liberty accident, saying that it was an accident. I said USS Liberty accident is not an accident. It was a deliberate attempt of a false flag in order to draw the United States into Israel's affairs with the Arab-Israeli war, which by Israel's affairs, Israel's massacre and genocide. Well, not. I guess could you call it genocide? But the mass targeting of civilians inside of Egypt during the '67 war. Nasser, the people try to say Nasser initiated the '67 war. Israel's the ones that crossed the border first. How's that initiating the war? They were both posturing, sure, but Israel's the one that actually jumped on it. It's like there's a difference between posturing and actually doing something. You can posture, there's a difference between acting like you're going to run this Rachel Corrie over with the bulldozer, but when you actually do it, it shows the amount of psychopaths, levels that a lot of these Israelis must be at, where this guy was obviously a psychopath who did it. And they're that fanatic for their ill cause of murder. It's an ideology of superiority, and ultimately it has a big disregard for the lives of anyone that's not inside the supposed chosen people that the Zionists believe themselves to be. Now, and also, I'll make a big clarification, is that not all Jews believe in the Talmud, and they disregard the Talmud, because the Talmud came along way after the Torah. The Talmud was a reaction book, Christianity. And also, if you're Christian and you still support Israel, just read a little bit of the excerpts in the Talmud and tell me how much you support Israel afterwards. And looking back on the USS Liberty Act, the USS Liberty, whatever you want to call it, but tragedy that happened. Looking back at it, and there's still a few survivors alive to this day. I mean, we're about to, almost 50 years later, and very few Americans know the true story about the USS Liberty. I mean, these are eyewitnesses, people that actually saw the event go down, and they seem to have an overwhelmingly different story than what the United States government has told for many years, and they try to keep them silent, and they won't stay silent forever. They came on my show twice. We had it back in last June of 2015. We had them on. We had quite a few of them on, actually, that day. And then we had a more condensed version earlier this year in January. But the first one, that was in June, I think was quite a bit more. We had quite a bit more people, and I think it was a little bit more. It was definitely really cool to do it the first time. You interview these people, these people that witnessed this infamy, this infamous moment in history, but and ultimately the plan was the ultimate goal was to possibly nuke Cairo at the end. And start war. This would have been a World War III event, because at the very minimum, what would happen in the end would have been not just Egypt, the United States would have been fighting, but I think Tito would have gotten involved, because that was one of his strongest allies. Yugoslavia would have been involved, which is a very large military, and also the other countries that were in that close allied bloc. And, we also talk about possibly the Soviets getting in the mix. I mean, even if just Yugoslavia was involved, it would have been a very massive war, much bigger than you would think of Yugoslavia. But when they were very strong, they had a very strong leader that built up their military to handle either the Soviets or the United States because they were on neither side. LBJ said that he didn't care that if every one of those people died on the USS Liberty, that he would rather for that to happen than him to be embarrassed or him to embarrass Israel. That was his mindset. And that was much different than JFK. And then when you look at the big contrast between JFK and LBJ and then future presidencies, between what JFK had to say about Israel, who wanted to send monitors to the nuclear development plant over there in Israel to stop them from building the nuclear weapons, to stop nuclear Israel from happening. That was one of the major reasons why he definitely got took out. And, of course, the Federal Reserve messing with Rothschild's money by saying that he would print silver certificates rather than Fed dollars, Federal Reserve notes. It's not a United States dollar at this point. When you talk about Fed notes, this is a private bank printing out money and then passing the debt to the American people. LBJ was not just a pawn of Israel, I would say, but it was the first pawn of many pawns of Israel, New World Order, and the Rothschilds for the upcoming years. In contrast to JFK, who tried to save this country. And he got assassinated for it. Apparently, I mean, I just bring stuff sometimes from the chat just to, I don't know if anybody can really verify this, but he said that Jack Ruby, who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, I guess to shut him up. I know Jack Ruby later died not too long after of cancer, but he claimed to be a translator for the Israeli reporters to get access to the garage where he killed Lee Harvey Oswald. The Lee Harvey Oswald, I've seen reports before that, in fact, Lee Harvey Oswald was actually working for JFK. Some people said they tried to save JFK, and there was other stuff that said that he just didn't. I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was just one more CIA man who was blamed as the patsy for the entire thing. What kind of person that just killed the president goes to the theater right afterwards? Wouldn't they be running to Mexico or something like that? Lee Harvey Oswald also apparently was almost no vision because there was a big fucking tree in the way. Was able to get 3 shots off in 8 seconds, hit 2 out of 3 times, and apparently that one bullet went everywhere. I mean, it was like, the bullet apparently went through like the back of Kennedy's neck, out through his throat, through his one elbow, out that elbow, or out through the other end of the elbow, then through the feet, and then through Connolly's back, then through his one wrist, then his other wrist, then through his thigh, and then onto the ground. Of course, there was more than just that shot of fire, and there was more than one person shooting. There was 2 shooters minimum, and even the Soviets' own report was different than the Americans' report, but it wasn't quite. So that they said it was a person from the second floor must have taken out JFK, but it was there was probably. I mean, what it looks like is like somebody maybe down the road somewhere got that fatal shot. That's what it looks like to me. but I'm not really a gun expert. I don't know that, but and some people said the driver did it, but that's one conspiracy theory. Like the late arrest because he doesn't pull out a gun. That's just the sunlight on the guy's head. It does really look like it, and if you actually are like looking for it and you're looking for a gun being pulled by the driver, it does look like the driver literally just picked up a pistol and shot JFK. But it wasn't the driver most likely, even though the driver would have had a major reason to kill JFK. It wasn't quite as much as the reasons as these other people that were involved. JFK apparently the driver belonged to like the Irish Protestant group over there, which JFK being Catholic apparently wouldn't have sat well with the driver. But the driver did do one thing was almost come to a complete stop and let the shooters get the shots out onto the car when it happened. Apparently, there was a personal letter from JFK, which was dated May 18th, 1963, and it said that unless American inspectors were allowed to go to Dimona, meaning the end of any military activities, Israel would find itself totally isolated. So I kind of doubt though that Israel would have been totally isolated if it lost JFK or if it lost the United States as an ally, because I feel like they would just look on an ally in Western Europe or might even or patch things up with the Soviet Union. Which, but at least on paper, the Soviet Union wasn't allies as Israel around the 1967 war. Apparently, there was a lot of propaganda posters against Israel in the Soviet Union in 1967. Apparently, and the attitude wasn't so favorable for Israel in 1967 in the Soviet Union. But, of course, if you look at the history, Stalin was the second. Stalin was very favorable of Israel, and the Soviet Union was the second country to recognize Israel. And they had pretty good relations to start off with. The JFK assassination, also, we had in that decade, Malcolm X gets assassinated, MLK gets assassinated, RFK gets assassinated, which all this leads, all the what you could say was these major figures that were actually shaking things up for the establishment and the ruling elite of this country. They all end up dead. As really Malcolm X, his contributions led to a movement that, was Edgar Hoover considers the most dangerous threat inside the United States. In order of probably what it meant is that the most dangerous threat to the federal government collapsing, because the Black Panther movement was getting a ton of support, not just from black people, from people of all races in the United States. And the Black Panthers dropped their black nationalist ideas pretty early into the movement. And pretty much Malcolm X's ideas were a big contributing factor to the Black Panther Party. And the whole Black Panther movement really saw out Malcolm X to be an inspiration. Black Panther movement really saw Malcolm X to be someone to really look up to. And Malcolm X is anti-Zionist. And so were the Black Panther movement. Because they believed they saw the racism went on over there, and everyone could just criticize the racism in the United States at the time, but they would criticize the racism within Israel. As you see, they have segregation, and they have inside the inside of Israel, they have Africans are treated lower the sentiment inside of the United. I think that ultimately there's the revolutionary movement inside the United States, all these revolutionaries, all these activists. There seems to be a loss of energy. You know, this is not as charged as it was in the 70s, and definitely not. You know, you can just look back to Occupy Wall Street. I think after Occupy Wall Street got infiltrated and the movement fell apart, now we have a lot of fracturing inside the activist movement inside the United States, and it needs to stop. And we need to all unite against the New World Order and Zionism. I know, easier said. I mean, big time easier said than done, because we have people that are ultimately not really dedicated to recognizing the Zionist threat, like inside the Patriot movement, inside the Black Lives Matter movement. We have people, and ultimately Black Lives Matter. It's bad if this is what's going on in the Black Lives Matter right now. Apparently, somebody inside of Black Lives Matter denounced Israel, which if this happens is a major step forward. It's kind of hard for me to believe that this is actually happening, because what I've seen is a lot of their members to be pro-Hillary Clinton, who was a major Israeli puppet. Hillary Clinton, the one that literally pledged to AIPAC in 2007, when she was looking to run the first time, or looking to get the presidency the first time, she was running at that time, said that she pledged to bomb Iran if she was president. So you're going to tell me that the literal, she's like, it's like she's barely, Hillary Clinton is so artificial that it's like only what her teleprompter and the people that pay, that's what she's saying. There's not too much original thought with Hillary Clinton, and that's how it's been for a long time. Trump, it seems like a lot of the stuff of it, what he says, might be all the stuff that he writes practically, or that he actually signs off on. That Hillary Clinton probably just says whatever. She doesn't care. She might not even look over it once. Trump probably like, okay, this sounds like something I would say. So I don't want to look like a loser, and I want to still be luxurious up there. But ultimately, he's still on the same Hollywood production. This election, this election is worse than this. Would be a pretty bad movie if this is a movie, because it's so fake. It's disgusting at this point. The Hillary Clinton, Trump, the script this is reused, it's recycled, which I think it's good, because Americans are waking up to it, because it's finally like, wait a minute, doesn't it seem a little bit familiar? It's like, oh yeah, because it already happened. In 2012, it just happened. It's like I said, they just revised the script a little bit and now made the 2016 script, which will lead to the eventual. Hillary Clinton will have the election rigged for her, and a lot of Americans will be in support of it. Wait, is somebody saying that? Is that legit? What somebody saying that some former senator was Stalin's kid, Stalin's son? I mean, they do look kind of similar, but just because they look similar doesn't mean that they're son and father. I mean, I wouldn't put it past. I mean, I just wondering. I just don't think they would have done that. They literally had Nazi officials that got Adolf Hussiter got the same position as he had in Nazi Germany as he got in NATO over here in the United States. So it would be too surprising. It wouldn't be too surprising if it's actually true. But there's actually to this day. I mean, there's still well, not really to this day as much, because now but there were a ton of Nazis that got positions in the United States after World War II, So I mean that happens with the United States government. They bring in people from fallen dictatorships and stuff like that in order to, I think they just work with the ones that have expertise, I guess. A lot of times, also the United States government works with the same. They have these people that are in their government for many years. Like we have Hillary Clinton that's been in the government for 40 years, and we have McCain that's been there for 30-something years. I think also there's a lot of people that are saying that Hillary Clinton apparently is not really in her best state of health right now. And here's what I have to say about that is that ultimately I think that's more scary. The fact that Hillary Clinton's she's very sick right now because she's already very sick mentally. Now she's one step closer to pushing the button. That will really scare people and scare Iran. I think is what it's supposed to scare Iran if they see this person. It's like the Reagan effect. When Reagan was up there and he acted like he didn't give a shit. Remember when Reagan went on national television, he goes into an unguarded area at the DMZ and is standing there where North Korea could take a shot on him. And I think that Reagan was trying to scare the other side that I don't give a shit. I'll have you guys take a shot on me and start World War III. That's what Hillary Clinton is to somewhat today, this old person that doesn't give a shit anymore, and that Hillary Clinton could do some massive thing that really fucks with millions of people because she's old and doesn't give a shit anymore. It could happen. Oh, so this one comment right now in the chat is it's a little bit over the top, but let's see. Oh, I mean, over the top of just like how do you even think of that concoction of a sentence? But yeah, I could imagine like Hillary Clinton. She's got. How would they get mad cow disease though from that? Don't you have to actually eat cow to get the mad cow disease? Mao cow disease? Yeah. That's a disease as well. The disease of Mao cow disease. It's what a lot of these people... all these people still on the internet that still defend Mao in 2016. They make the whole activist community... And this was the stuff... it's like there's this little... They're a little tiny portion of people. I still support Mao and Stalin in 2016. Oh no, everything that all those reports of the gulags, or everyone that was in the gulags deserved it, and all those reports of all those people that Stalin killed that were innocent, it was all made up. Yeah, and they always say, oh, but the population was higher afterwards. Yeah, it doesn't mean that they were pumping, other people were bringing a bunch of kids, 3 or 4 kids, even 5 kid families. Their population could still go up. I mean, sure, I think some people put out we can't just put out random numbers out there. And, when we're talking about people like them, because when you start putting out random numbers, it's just like whatever number sounds good, then you discredit yourself. But when you put the documented numbers, which is probably somewhere around 30 million, which is an absolute travesty, and talk about also the very real event that happened in Ukraine, Holodomor, it also point out that some people don't like to use. I think some people like to try to say the anti-Russian crowd tries to say that Putin wants to do some kind of Holodomor in Ukraine. But if anybody's doing some kind of mass killing like that, it'll be Poroshenko, who's trying to do that against the Russian population inside of eastern Ukraine. And it probably could have happened if he would have had control of Crimea for the last 2 years, and if Russia wasn't there to stop him, because you saw what happened to Odessa on May 2nd, 2014. there were pregnant women in that building. They burned it down. It's like Waco. You know, it's the same kind of mindset. If you're just willing to burn, if you can burn down a building with pregnant women inside, you don't really have much empathy for the other side or for the people that you're the people that suppose are the what your targets or whatever. I mean, you have no kind of I don't know what kind of person can do that. Burn down a building where pregnant women were present at. And what the? I'm trying to look at that picture in the chat room and saying that is that Nikita Khrushchev? It's kind of hard to see. That's besides the point. We're at 10:06 right now, Eastern Time. We're already more than halfway through the show, and everyone that's listening right now, I would say that if you're a new time listener, I think maybe listen to some of my more earlier shows. Listen to, or just like back, I had my first show at UCY was talk about Zionism, and then if you go back to really where where you could see like get the basics is my first ever show that I did on the radio. Period, way back in November 2013, which on that show. And also, sorry about that. Is that picking up? Is that picking up? My dog in the background. It's not even in my room or anything like that, so it sucks that it's picking up from here. But that happens every now and then. That's the struggle when you don't have an actual radio studio you go to. Get the background noise from your house, and but you know what, you can just gotta deal with it. Oh shit! Somebody said in the chat room that there's the Mossad's in my backyard, and that's what my dog's barking at. My dog's barking at the Mossad in the backyard. I think that if they were trying to do something like that, there's not really many places to hide. This is a pretty. It's not like I got a really big property where they could actually be hiding somewhere in the back corners of the backyard. It's pretty small and confined, so. I think that if somebody lurk around would have to be pretty good at it, but you are talking about some of the most sneakiest motherfuckers on the planet, Mossad. That's something I might let's see road dogging. I think I'm gonna take that. It's gonna be that's my official Mossad early warning system. My dog. Hey, don't even suggest that the other person that was talking in the chat. No, my dog. He's small, but he's fierce. He could fend them off for a little bit. And that's the thing about the Chihuahuas. Imagine those things were full size. How fierce those motherfuckers would be! Like it's like they got a lot of fierceness in that little. It's a little dog like that, but now I'm trying to think where I was talking about. I was talking about. Well, I still talk about Israel. Yeah, it was. I think I was talking, but what little thing I was mentioning on Israel before I got a little bit sidetracked. Probably talk about. Oh yeah. Anyways, I was talking about a little bit earlier is that Israel and JFK relationship, and that Israel took out, or it was partial. I mean, Gaddafi said that Israel took out JFK. I don't think that they were solely responsible, but the people that are in charge of Israel were ultimately responsible, that control the Federal Reserve, because that's, it's like Nathan Rothschild said way back that give me control of a country's currency and I care not who writes their laws. So when JFK decided to no longer have the Federal Reserve control America's money, you knew they were going to take them out. And all I was saying is that people that are kind of newer to all this truth topics probably should check out like my shows way back. Like my first show ever. Check out some of the other shows on UCY Radio where I go talk a little bit more about the basics. So, when I do like this show, it is kind of a show I'm going all around. But today we're gonna who we're talking about a lot. It's about Israel. And the Israel, who we're talking about was JFK, the relation with JFK, also 9/11. People don't like to talk about this one. A lot of people talk about 9/11 truth, but they don't really like to go into this little part about 9/11 truth, about urban movement systems. They don't like to talk about the 60 people that were arrested on the day of 9/11 inside of New York. They don't like to talk about the mural van. I mean, it's like you have literally a van going around around the city with a mural of the Twin Towers being hit by a plane. Isn't that a little bit suspicious? Or the people that are there to document the event and they're dancing. They're the dancing Israelis. That's one thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google that tonight. The dancing Israelis. And it's not some kind of group that you watch at Universal Orlando or something like that. It's not something that comes after the Blue Man Group and the Fear Factor show at Universal Orlando. That's Dancing Israelis is a few Israelis celebrating the start of the event that would lead to 3,000 Americans dead. And also, of course, on the day of 9/11, if you look, there's 911 calls coming from people talking about these vans, these white vans going around that they believed would have been suspicious. But later, we don't hear anything of it. There was a few reports around the days around 9/11 that went around it, but then they kind of stopped talking about it. And like these 60 Israelis, they were sent home. I probably were debriefed and sent home. It wasn't a small role. Some people like to deny the role altogether or to say it was a small role. This was a pretty large role in the event. And yes, people are going to really fixate. People are really going to look at the Saudi 28 pages or whatever. Yeah, the Saudis had a role in it, but it was providing some actors. It wasn't really the really nasty stuff, I don't think. It was all very nasty. But, it wasn't like literally to the coordination. So really that was the best way to say it, the very nasty stuff, but the more larger part of this whole thing, this whole very terrible thing that happened. Because ultimately 3,000 Americans still ended up without their lives. Didn't go home that day. 3,000 Americans died. And the United States government, the Israeli government, and the Saudis being responsible. And it shows there's Hey, sorry about that. Apparently, I guess I dropped off there for a short time, but I'm back, and continue with this show. I was saying is that we have all this technology very easily, very credible to use and utilize, but yet people don't want to just take. I mean, it's not. It doesn't take really any time. It's like tell your family to look up those few things that I was saying tonight. Those few topics that really could possibly open them up to looking things a different way. If they would see what is the dance in Israelis, if they saw what is, they found what's Operation Mockingbird. What is who are the Rothschilds? A lot of people don't even know who the Rothschilds are. So, talk about Rachel Corrie, talk about USS Liberty, talk about $5 billion of taxpayer money that goes to Israel. Just a few things. This would take just a few minutes to look up, and they could have a very different perspective. And I implore you to do this. I really, it's like we could talk all day here on the radio and try to win this little battle here by trying to get some people to listen to our show. It may change a month, but we also need to go out and make a direct approach. And the information war is a very big front of this battle. And also, if we get more people actually educated about these issues, then we may actually be able to do something physically. And there's a few things. If you want to do some, there's some calls for something to be done for your family. If you know about the if you are in a place where you work and you think you can, it still be in your best interest to talk about this at work. It might be some kind of profession where that's not really what you say doesn't really get you in trouble. I guess maybe some non-professional setting, maybe some more, maybe some small business or something like that. I don't know. You could try to talk to your coworkers. Really, I think that the first major thing is trying to get just reach out to your family members, because it's like they are more likely to listen, to actually have an open ear, and actually consider what you're saying. And especially if you spend a lot of time with them, then you can actually take the time to actually lay it out for them. Especially if you got kids, they're our future generation. They're the youth are the vanguard of revolution, so they need to know and have the information for them. Especially if they're at the age where they might be making some major decisions of what they're going to do. Don't let your kids join the military. Whatever you do, the parents allow their kids to join the military, and then that should be where you put your foot down and tell them that they're not going to do that, and lay out the reasons why. You tell them the truthful thing. You don't go around and say whatever you say, because they will get killed, and they will get killed in vain. They will have been used by the elite, by the New World Order, to do their agenda. It's like Henry Kissinger said, military men are dumb animals to be used in foreign policy. That's it. That's all I think of them. There's no honor in the United States military anymore. And if you want to do anything to defend your country, you could join a militia. That's really about the options that you have nowadays. If was actually a physical thing, or you could do try to battle out through the InfoWars. I know not the channel InfoWars, but the information war. The information war that Hillary Clinton said that the government is losing that. So push harder and totally crush them on the information war. The alternative media, yes, more people are going to the alternative media, and more, but also some people are going to the corrupted alternative media, such as InfoWars, Breitbart, that kind of stuff. We, the true alternative media, should try to get our family to look at the real alternative media. And also, we do our part by providing information now here in the real alternative media. And doing and I'm going back to the chat room just to see what's going on there. I didn't know that was who brought that up in the chat room. Didn't know about that. In over over in other countries, I think that people saw for Americans the reliance on the new or reliance on the local news and all these news channels where there was obviously special interest involved and there's obviously biases and obviously not a lot of real reporting was happening. A lot of people around the world saw it to be ridiculous, and that Americans' idea that we can't trust anything on the internet, but we'll believe anything our TV set says. That was the idea that was the mindset for many years. But luckily, it's changed finally. Luckily, that's no longer the not as much is the mindset of Americans, and they're finally starting to look at the alternative media. They're finally starting to look at the smaller radio stations like us that are not controlled by special interest or by any kind of big money. People, though, I still see some of the young generation look, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and they're quoting stuff as what's that. Just look at the scenario. There's a few scenarios where I see a lot of, and even people inside of the supposedly truthers, they quote, talk about some certain situations. Will use the corporate media as the quote. But you say that you don't believe anything from the corporate media, but if it goes along with whatever pseudo ideology you're following with, you take the side of the corporate media. I mean, very rarely do I actually post anything from a CNN, Fox, or anything like that. Just like when it's a big event may happen or something like that, and they don't have the bias or whatever, just like a report that it's happened. Or sometimes, I guess they omit some of the major flaws in the system, but they try to whitewash it or under-exaggerate it. I don't really post. I guess sometimes I've used it a couple of times. I don't actually go look for it. It's just like on my news feed, I might reshare something like that. But and when it comes to foreign policy and stuff like that, just about never. I always use every day. I use alternative media sources. That's when I'm posting stuff from various Facebook pages or whatnot. Even like, for example, one I use quite a bit is I don't believe everything they say about the anti-media, which is connected to UCY radio. Yeah, that's a pretty decent source for information. I hope the InfoWar continues in the right direction. And I hope that the young generation doesn't start to fall back into the just the online versions is what I see. Sharing stuff from the CNN online site or the Fox online site, but yet they don't have any knowledge of RT or Press TV or any of that. That a lot of them don't even know. They've never even heard of these sites. And I fear that's a possibility. It's because of it. It's like I said, there was more revolutionary activity in the 70s than there is today, despite the abundance of information available and how easy it is to learn about this stuff that years ago there was just the encyclopedia, some books in the library. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't all these different sites that you can go to on the internet. But yet they still sought information that was different than what they didn't trust their television sets, even though the television set was one of the few places to even get any kind of in quotations information. But nowadays with the internet, you think that the amount of revolutionary activity within the youth would have went up, but they just fall for the Bernie Sanders, the Hillary Clinton illusions, or they even just or may even at the best Gary Johnson. But as I said, what I think of Gary Johnson now, it's not too great. Especially when I saw that he had bragged about meeting with war criminals Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu, and that he was saying that Israel is an ally of the United States. It's like I said, Gary Johnson was as a governor, and all these high publicly elected positions, they all have to swear allegiance to Israel. So it's not surprising that Gary Johnson would be pro-Israel. But it just shows that he's not much different, and also that his running mate not too long ago supported gun control and was a member, I think, of the Council of Foreign Relations, which is a major globalist New World Order think tank that advises the United States foreign policy, as it said, the Council of Foreign Relations. People don't even know these like shadow organizations such as the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, or whatnot. It's like, it reminds me of like when people hear like the Trilateral Commission. It reminds me of the scene from the Boondocks where Huey's trying to tell his granddad about the Trilateral Commission, and it's like, what, the Trisexual Commission? What's the Trisexual Commission? Or he says, what's a trisexual? That's what he heard, and that's like the blankness that a lot of Americans goes into a lot of Americans' minds go into when you start mentioning these words. And a lot of the young Americans, they just ignore a lot of it. It needs to change. I think we need to reach out as much as we can to the young generation, because ultimately, say it again, the youth are the vanguard of revolution. They are the youth of the vanguard of revolution. They're the ones that throughout history and any kind of major change have been largely responsible. But inside this country, we're having this dwindling sector of activism, I guess, coming from a lot of the activists in this country are 50 plus years old. A lot of the people that were at some of these, for example, are truly involved in these different rallies or whatnot, or like for example, the anti-war in Syria rallies, which there was quite a bit of people that actually showed up to those rallies when they happened. Remember in 2013 when we almost got into they were about to start military strikes against Syria, but there was a lot of backlash. Only 9% of the United States supported it, and at the end of the day, they decided that they'll do it a different way and said that they're fighting these terrorist boogeymen inside the country while they're actually trying to take out the Assad regime, like what they did with ISIS. And they were put in this group that they funded and started a while back. It goes back to the Bush administration. ISIS, it came about like Al Qaeda and the Taliban under Reagan, and under the Mujahideen goes back to under Carter in the 70s, and then later Reagan, under the Reagan administration, really cemented the eventual takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban. Osama bin Laden was literally seen in a newspaper article in the 1980s. It's shown this as anti-Soviet warrior, and it's a picture of this Osama bin Laden. We're already 3/4 of the way through the show. And at this point, I mean, is it kind of worn a little bit old at this point? I've made most of the show because it was kind of a general topic, so I was able to really kind of go all around talking about many different things today. But ultimately, I just made another show. It's like I've done recently. I've made the anti-Israel rants, because I want to really focus a lot of it, because I see a lot of people in the activist community that are not willing to, and so a lot of people are just see us a little bit disturbing, but they don't realize how ultra disturbing their culture is, and their disregard for lives that aren't the lives that aren't of Zionist Jews. Instead, they see themselves as superior. They see themselves as they see the Arabs as dogs, or And ultimately, I don't get that. It's that why? I mean, it's kind of weird. It's like I see people saying it sometimes about that a lot of people use that as an insult, but I never got what's so bad about being a dog. I mean, it's like. But calling them animals and stuff like that, dehumanized. I guess it is bad when it's dehumanizing, but it's like a dog is a lot better than a fucking Zionist. Dogs are man's best friend. Zionism is a danger to humanity. Just saying. And a lot of people in the activist community, like I said, refuse to see the total malignant it is. This little tiny country causing all this disruption inside the Middle East. Who's the ones funding ISIS? Who's the ones that have been caught on video training ISIS soldiers, and who's been known to house theory terrorists inside of their country and their hospitals, and who's been known to harbor ISIS terrorists inside their country? Israel. They're 52 miles away from Israel, inside of Syria, and there actually is a border, the Golan Heights, that Israel occupies. But if ISIS never attacks Israel, Israel is a big time coordinating with ISIS in order to take out the Assad regime, and the United States is doing the same thing with ISIS, and Saudis are also working with ISIS to take out the Assad regime, because the Assad regime is truly anti-Zionist, and since they share the border with Israel, it scares them, and they don't want somebody that's not on board with their agenda that close, so they'll do whatever to take them out. The Assad regime, Iran, Houthi Yemens, those are the three countries, I guess you could call the resistance inside the Middle East. They're the resistance to Zionism, the resistance to the New World Order. And you see that there's always a new excuse on the media in order to initiate war with them and to initiate they always to call them enemies of America. Well, it wasn't Iran that attacked the USS Liberty, and it wasn't Iran that did the Law of Bonn affair. In fact, I've seen Tehran and Iran to be a modern country, and they're very open and accepting many different thoughts inside their country. And it's not, I see a lot of people sharing stuff like saying that all the women are so repressed there in Iran. then you're thinking of Saudi Arabia, where they can't even drive, and that's an American ally. But in Iran, the women are seem to have to be they're quite equal footing. It's maybe not quite equal, but it's definitely, in comparison with Saudi Arabia, light years ahead. And it's just a much more traditional culture as well, instead of Iran. Saudi Arabia, they're forced practically to wear the tall burqa, and that's an American ally. So America could talk all they want about women's rights or human rights, but they support Saudi Arabia. And what happens to somebody that opposes the Saudi regime? They get their heads chopped off. In Iran, they have their opposition has open rallies. So the whole idea, Iran's so backwards. And they have Facebook there. I have quite a few Iranian friends on Facebook. So to the people that want war with Iran, just keep that all in mind. That that America supports everything that you say that Iran is, while Iran is not everything that you say Iran is. They are the ones that also Iranians are they also quite different they have a somewhat different culture than a lot of people like to call them Arabs, but they're actually Persians. Just keep that in mind. The whole war, the whole war with Iran deal. Do you really think that Congress or the Senate or the president or anybody or the vice president is going to save anybody or save them from the or save our own soldiers from war with Iran? Because you can imagine that how many of our own soldiers will die if there's war with Iran. There will probably be millions of soldiers involved in such an operation, and ultimately, that Israel won't go in there by themselves. Like I said, they're going to wait till the Americans back them up. And Iran also, it's going to be Iran and Syria, not just Syria, it's going to be, or not just Iran. It's going to be Syria and Iran together. It's going to be a very massive war, and I imagine there's going to be some kind of false flag, and they're going to blame it on some Iranian. It almost seemed like they were going to do that. Remember when MH370 disappeared? Remember how they said there was Persians on that plane, or there was Iranians on the plane, and it's like, and then people were saying, "Oh, Persian on the plane." It sounds like snakes on a plane or something like that. What the scary ring it has to Americans. Everybody seems to have forgot about that. Remember that MH370, the plane that just fucking disappeared on March 1st, 2014? That plane disappeared, and still no one's found it to this day. And it looked like that they might try to start some kind of thing against Iran at that point. Because they said there were Iranians on board and try to make it seem like it was going to be that they're going to make some link to terrorism with it. Then a few months later, another Malaysian airline becomes the victim of a real false flag, MH17, over the skies of Ukraine, which got hit by, ultimately, all the real investigations show that it got hit by West Ukrainian fighter jets, while they were trying to say at the time that the British media and hyper-sensationalized United States media were both saying that Putin that Putin got all those people killed and they were shot down by his supposed thugs. He calls them, that's what they think of them. And these people are just defending their homeland from Nazis, Novorossiya militants. That they shot down with missiles that they don't have. Ultimately, their whole story kind of unraveled, and now they don't really mention it too much. Now the war is still waging on over there in Ukraine. That's another thing that they talk about. Tons of money going to. $1 billion was sent right after the coup happened over there in West Ukraine. That took out the former president and brought about Poroshenko to power. The United States government gave West Ukraine $1 billion after supposedly they tried to make it seem like spontaneous riots and a protest led to the resignation of the former leader. It was more of a coup, and it brought about the billionaire oligarch, some people call him the Chocolate King, Poroshenko, became the president of Ukraine, and then ultimately, now you have what's the situation that they have there. I think that MH370. I think that might have landed somewhere. I think that might have landed out there at Diego Garcia Air Force Base. That's what somebody like. There apparently was some press conference that happened early on, or when early on the media coverage, there was a press conference, and there was one of the people that was around it shouted out, "Oh yeah, the plane's at Diego Garcia Air Force Base." And it seemed like that interview was never referenced or talked about again, or wasn't an interview. It was I guess you could say it was the press conference. I mean, planes don't disappear in modern day, do they? I mean, this is a time where the government brags about how they can read a newspaper from space. And you're going to tell me that that they can't find a giant plane inside of they can't find a giant plane somewhere in the Indian Ocean, and they were saying, oh, we might be hearing beeps from the black box. You know, we can't find it. You know, the black box should be easily. It's like whenever the black box gets tempered, realize that thing's almost like indestructible, and that if those things don't easily break. It's like with 9/11, there was no black boxes recovered. There would definitely be the black boxes recovered, and they'd be studied the shit out of them. It was actually a real event. You know, with terrorism and an unknown source of the terrorism at first. There would be all kinds of talk about the black box. Oh, we heard this guy talk, and we said this guy. You know, there'd be a lot of we wouldn't stop hearing about it, or we definitely would hear a lot about it, and we didn't. With MH370, they should have found it. It's been two and a half years now, and the plane still is completely very much has eluded all the people searching for it. Well, going back to Ukraine, also one of the people that was big time behind the Ukrainian coup against the former president, bring about Poroshenko, was Soros, who has pretty much said that his ultimate intention is, you could say, I mean, it would sound like he wanted World War III with Russia. He wanted some kind of confrontation with Russia at some point. And it wouldn't be surprising because, who Soros is well, for one, he was a if you want to see like a something that shows Nazi and Zionist collaboration, Soros, who's a Zionist, was a Nazi as a kid. He worked as some kind of he handed out deportation notices to other people in the Jewish community when he was a teenager. I don't think he was an adult during the Nazi government. By the time he was an adult, he was already the Nazi government had already lost the war. But Soros probably has a long time hatred against Russia, and the fact that he he's one of the main people that pushes the Ukraine violence and pushes the West Ukrainians' crackdown on the East Ukrainians defending themselves. These people are just defending their homeland from they should deserve independence. And people in Lugansk and Donetsk that have been fighting for months, and they still have they've been fighting for months, or actually more than months, for years now, and they have it's been practically like a stalemate. Very few people even hear about this civil war that's going on over there in Ukraine, and it's absolutely terrible. And you're talking about practically genocide that Poroshenko is unleashing on his people over there in East Ukraine. And the United States is a major funder of this. Neo-Nazis being funded by the United States. John Kerry was a major player in this, and also another major player, and it has been Israel. And the fact that they're the second biggest financer of the West Ukrainian Nazi takeover. Because I say West Ukrainian, because at this point, the East Ukrainians, they've established pretty much their own government. They're fighting to try to keep parts autonomous, and they deserve independence. And ultimately, I think their ultimate goal is to eventually overthrow Poroshenko. But there's a lot of money coming from the United States and Israel, so it'd be very hard for that to unravel for them. It seems that they've gotten a pretty strong foothold now inside of Kiev when they didn't really have that not that long ago. Now they're trying to confuse people and try to say, oh, well, those people, this is not, the genocide's not really being committed by people inside the government. It's from the Azov Battalion, but the government of West Ukraine supports the Azov Battalion, which these are extremists that carry around pictures of Adolf Hitler around. And a lot of people on the West Ukrainian side also think Stefan Bandera is a hero. Stefan Bandera was a Nazi collaborator. They got a lot of people killed. He is definitely not no hero, and these people are destroying a lot of their own history because they want to repudiate a lot of any connections with Russia, even though they were with Russia a long time. A lot of parts of Ukraine. There was only a small area that's actually Ukraine. It's been Ukraine for a long time, and then there was more territory was ceded from Russia over the years over to Ukraine, and Crimea is something that literally Ukraine just got in 1991, had been always Russian, and the people are 65% ethnically Russian. They voted 96% in order to become part of Russia, but then they try to act like there's election fraud and that these people were trying to make it seem like they were forced by the Russians to vote that way. But there'd be no reason for them to support the people that literally said that they don't want Russian being spoke inside their country. It'd be like they pretty much what the equivalent of it being would be like Spanish being banned here in the United States, and that's what the West Ukrainians do not want Russian being spoken in their country, and they don't like the Russian people very much at all. So it was in their best interest to vote in favor of Crimea being annexed by Russia. I see the word is that Soros was a Sonderkommando. I'm not exactly sure what that is because I'm pretty sure it's a German word, but I'm guessing there's Sonderkommando. Is that like what I was saying it sounds more combat related than that. I know that Nazis used a lot of they did similar to what Israel does today, which is that they use people of they indoctrinated kids very early. Apparently, towards the end of the war, they were using like 13 and 14-year-olds combat. I know that the Israelis, of course, they do stuff like have little 6-year-olds sign their bombs like, "Oh, love from Israel" or something like that for the Palestinians to get killed by. I mean, it's sick. And they, at the same time, also they teach their kids like how to become a soldier in the future at like 6 years old and stuff like that. At the same time, you notice that they try to make it seem like kids shouldn't be anywhere near guns. You shouldn't teach your kids how to shoot over here in the United States. While meanwhile over there in Israel, they're teaching their kids how to be killers at a very young age. I was also reading this was that about the disappeared about the plane that disappeared. Correction, Boeing 777 or 777. Oh yeah, it's that the plane has a minimum of 2 black boxes, a transponder. The black boxes. Yeah, it's almost like an indestructible device inside the plane. And I mean, it takes a lot for it because it's supposed to be able to withstand plane crashes or whatever. So when a plane crash happens, they can open it up and see what happened. The NTSB or whatever international, or whatever in that country that crashes in, whatever equivalent they have over there. But they try to act like that they couldn't find it on that plane. They can't find it on 9/11. When apparently these planes really couldn't find luggage, they couldn't find a screw. They couldn't. That plane just disappeared practically into the hole in Pennsylvania. And of course, the Pentagon, the only person to have walked through that hole where the plane supposedly went through, said that she saw no evidence that plane had went through that hole. It was like a circular hole. Where did the wings go? Common sense, people. Yeah, Otto posted the picture there of them signing the missiles over there in Israel. Yeah, it's a real thing. It's like I said, their culture from what the stuff like dressing up as the Twin Towers on their holiday over there to that kind of stuff like signing the missiles to the other stuff like Rachel Corrie pancakes is a common joke over there in Israel. It's a very, very sick culture. And as well, America's false patriotic culture is similar. It resembles it. Here in the United States, we have all these people screaming America and, talk about how they're going to bomb Islam. And you see, I can't say that with a straight voice. I can't say, because I've seen people say stuff like that. You got to put I love America, and I'm telling you, those muzzies, those muzzies gonna dumb fuck up America. We gotta go bomb Islam over there in the Shania Desert. What else stuff with the typical? I mean, that's what Bill O'Reilly said on Fox News. Well, I know a lot about it being in combat or whatnot, but he loves America. He just wants to protect it from the Muslims. The whole, turn whatever country to a parking lot. America, fuck yeah, that whole culture. The idea, people would say, it doesn't matter what happens to people around the world because they're not American. That's also it's also a pretty sick culture, and you can blame. It was almost like redesigned for the United States, like how they were able to brainwash their people over there in Israel to become these fanatics, and they also have like a little bit of the false religious aspect, but it's the Christian Zionist religion that they have over here, the twisted version of Christianity that is compatible with Zionism. That's the religious fanatic part that they put into the whole American culture. That they believe themselves to be such patriots or whatnot, but in reality, they're supporting the politicians that are destroying the country. They're supporting the military budget, the absolutely crazy military budget that's bankrupt in this country, and they also support the hating Muslims rhetoric that the Zionists want us to follow. That they want the Christians and Muslims to hate each other, and they want the American people to really hate the Muslims by believing all these things are not true about them, and they go about on and on about taking stuff out of historical perspective. About people bring up the same argument over and over again that they said that the Quran supports this because this guy did this 1,400 years ago, when the average life expectancy was 30. Doesn't make it totally right, what he did, but it was a whole different time period, and the Quran definitely doesn't support that. But anyways, this whole aside is that I hear the same like three arguments when people that fall into the Zionist rhetoric of Muslims, which it's ultimately the same stuff that they say about Muslims over there is what a lot of Americans have fallen into of believing about Muslims over here. Because ultimately, they use a lot of the same tactics. They even train our police. The Israelis train American police to do to the dissident population and protests and stuff over here as what they do to the Palestinian people over there, and to be it brutal and to show no mercy. And just to do to the population in general, the police state is in part, or how it's gone to this day, is in part responsible of Israel. And somebody posted a picture of Purim Fest 2016. I don't know is Purim a holiday that the Talmud is the Torah started, or is it the Talmud started? But I can imagine is that they're probably I can imagine it sounds like something. I mean, what it's turned into today is probably influenced by the Talmud, and 70% of Israeli Jews is what he's saying is that they're claimed to be atheists, but they believe God granted them the Holy Land. I know it's a high percentage of them claim to be atheists, but yet believe that God gave them the Holy Land, which again shows it's a false religion. It's a cult. It's a group of people it's ran by psychopaths, and a lot of the people that they turn into psychopaths that are in that whole in the whole Zionist crowd over there. Anyways, we're in the last minute of the show. Thanks to everyone who tuned into Voice of Rebellion Radio here at UCY TV tonight. Be trying to do a podcast.
And no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights, when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return, and if I back down now, then